So this is the skirt part, and the length of it is 45 for myself. This is the back and this is the front part, so it's folded, and this part is also called the zipper allowance area, which I left. From the point of my front part, not the zipper allowance area, I measured out my waist circumference divided by 4, which is 6 inches. My waist circumference divided by 4 is 6 inches. And then from the top part, I placed my tape, and I came down by 7 inches, which will represent my hip length. So from my waist to my hip, the length is 7 inches. So after doing that, I went ahead to mark in my hip circumference. After marking out my hip circumference at the point where I marked my hip length, I'm going to go on to connect it with my waist length. So I connected my waist measurement and my hip measurements together. You could see, so I'm just using my chalk to make it prominent. After doing that, I'm just going to go all the way down by my hip measurement, my hip circumference. So my hip circumference was 9 and some few inches, so I went all the way down to the bottom part by 9 and some few inches. You go all the way down by your hip circumference. After doing that, I came at the hip point. I marked in my allowance. I'm using 3 inches for my allowance. I came at the waist point. I also marked in my allowance. I'm using 3 inches for the waist allowance. So basically our allowance is 3 inches we are using. So I just went ahead to do all that all the way to the bottom point. After marking into the bottom part, I'm just going to go ahead to tear it all open. I'm going to go ahead to trim out the excesses from the point of where my allowance ended. The next thing I did was to open up my zipper allowance area for the back. So it is essential that you also repeat the same thing. You open up your zipper allowance area at the back. To determine the length of this, all you just have to do is to plus your main length of your drawstring. So if your main length is 14 inches, you plus it by 14 inches again. That's 14 times 2 is going to give you 28. So that's the length you are going to be working with. So I plus my main length plus 2, times 2. So that was what it gave me. So what I just did here was I did the same thing I did for the lace area. I measured out my waist, which is 6 inches. That's my waist circumference, 6 inches. Now because this is a drawstring, I'm not going to use 7 inches for my hip length. I'm going to plus 7 inches times plus 2. So 7 plus 7 is 14. So I came down by 14 inches, which will represent my hip length. Why? Is because this is a drawstring dress. So from that point of 14 inches, I went ahead to mark out my hip circumference, and then I'm just going to go on to come all the way down by my hip circumference. But before then, I connected my waist circumference with my hip circumference. So remember guys, because this is a drawstring, that is why I plussed my hip lengths together. So using 7 is not okay, so you just have to plus your hip lengths together. If your own is 8, 8 plus 2 is 16. If your own is 9, 9 times 2 is 18. So for this part, I came all the way down by my hip length. So there was no need of measuring it because I already knew my hip length. So I came all the way down by my hip length. So the next thing I'm just going to go now is to add in my allowance area. So it should be enough, you should be generous enough to add enough allowance for this, because you are going to be folding it to form the drawstring area. So for this part, I used 2 inches for my allowance area. So your own can vary, but I think 2 inches is more than enough for making a drawstring. So after doing this, the next thing I'm just going to do is to go ahead to open up my zipper allowance area. So I divided it into two. This is the back part, so I opened it up. I opened up the zipper allowance area, and I also went on to trim out the excesses of my main measurement. So I have them trimmed out over here. So this is the zipper allowance area. I did not sew it, instead I pinned it down. So you should also do the same, pin it down instead of sewing it. So the bottom part, as you can see, I already folded the bottom part. I folded the front bottom part, and I also folded the back bottom part. So that's what you do next. Just fold up the bottom part of the front and the back area, just as I did over here. So this is the zipper allowance. This is my back, sorry, this is the back part. So I already have it opened up. I'm just going to be placing my front out on top of it. So I already placed the front part on top of it, so I'm just going to go into adding my measurements. So I first of all went into adding my waist measurement at this point. After adding my waist measurement, remember we came down by 14 inches, so I also came down by 14 inches here, and that's the points that I'll be adding in my hip circumference. So I also went in to add in my hip circumference, and I'm going to connect the line together. You could see what I did over here, so don't get confused. This is the front and the back part that is placed together. So I connected the lines together because we're going to be sewing over this area. So after connecting the lines together, I'm going to go all the way down by my hip circumference. I went all the way down by my hip circumference, and I'll also repeat the same process at the other parts. So guys, I also repeated the same process. Just as I said, I repeated it at this part. So we're just going to go on to sew over all these areas that we have our chalk on. We're going to sew over them, and I'll come back. So I already went ahead to sew over this area, and I also sewed the other parts of it. You can see what I did. So the next thing I'm going to do is to unpin the pins I placed at my zip allowance area. So that was why I said you should not sew it, so that it will be easy for you. So after I unpinned it, I separated both parts of it. You can see, so this is one part of the skirt. The next thing I'm going to do is to fold it, and the reason I'm folding the allowance area is just because of I'm going to be putting my ropes. So that is how we are going to make our drawstring. So if you're familiar with the way a drawstring is made, you should understand what I'm saying. But if you're not familiar, just watch what I'm doing. So I folded this part, you can see, and after folding it, I'm going to be sewing over the area from the top to the bottom part, and I'm also going to be repeating the same process at the other parts too. You could see I opened up the allowance area, so you could see what I did. So this is what I was saying. This is the front part. You could see what I did. Sorry, that's the back, and then this is the front part. You could see what I did. I folded it from the top to the bottom part. So this hole I placed my finger on is the area that I'll be imputing my ropes. I repeated the same process at all the parts. So the next thing I'm just going to do now is to make the ropes that I'm going to be using to be imputing inside of it. So guys, this is what I'm using to make our rope that we're going to be imputing inside. So we've already made the ropes, and this is the rope, and the rope we're going to be imputing it at all four sides. So I'm going to show you how I made the rope for this part. You could see what we have here. I already imputed the rope. So this is the rope I'm going to be imputing at one side. So I just first of all went in to use my lighter to seal the mouth of it. So it is essential you do it just to give it a neat finishing. So after doing it, after using my lighter, I'm just going to use my safety pin to put it in. I used my safety pin to put it in because this is what we are going to use. So from the bottom part, not the top part, from the bottom part, I went in and I placed the rope inside the hole we made. So I placed my rope and my safety pin inside the rope we made, and I'm just using my safety pin to guide me to the top part. So I hope you guys are familiar with this method. It's not hard. So I just use my safety pin to place inside the hole we made, and now it's just going to guide me to the top part. So that was the essence of all this we are doing. So you can see that the safety pin has been able to guide me to the top part. So that is just what I did. I hope you understand this part. So now I already brought out my safety pin to the top part. You could see what we did, and that was how I imputed the rope at all four sides. So what we're just going to do is to make sure we stitch that area. So this is what we are talking about. So this is the drawstring. So I'm just going to go ahead to show you how it works. You could see how I'm using the ropes to adjust it at all sides. So that is just the way you do it. I use my ropes to adjust it, giving me any desired length at which I want it to be. So this is just the skirt, and so that's it for this part. So guys, this is the lace area. For what I just did here is that I placed the front part of my lace on top of the back part of my lace. So you could see what I did. This is the back part, and the one beneath is the front part. So I just went in to impute my body measurement as we do normally. I just went in to impute my waist circumference. I went down, came down by 7 inches for the lace area, which represents my hip circumference, my hip length, sorry, and then I imputed my hip circumference. After imputing my hip circumference, I'm so sorry you can't see the line is not prominent enough, the chalk. So I just came all the way down by my hip circumference. I'm just going to go all the way down to the bottom part by my hip circumference, which is 9 and some few inches. So this process I'm doing is also the process I'm going to be repeating at the other parts of the skirts. After repeating the same process at the other side, I'm just going to go ahead to sew them all together. So I'm done sewing this side, and I also went ahead to sew the other side of it. So I'm just going to open up the zip allowance area completely at the lace area. So this lace area, I opened up the zip allowance area. So I already opened this up completely. You could see what I did. I opened it up completely. You could see what I did. So the next thing I'm just going to do is, using my tape, I'm going to measure where I want from the top part. I place my tape at the top part where I want my plain area, that's the drawstring area, to stop. So mine was about 18 inches, sorry, 17 inches. So I marked it at both sides of the allowance area. So mine was 18 inches. This is where I want my plain part to stop at. So this is the plain part here. I already went into double stitch it because I'm going to be drawing it to be a gathered form. So I double stitched it at both sides. I repeated the same thing at the other side also. You could see this other side I already drew it to be a gathered. So at this point I turned the lace area to the front, so don't get confused. So the area where I marked 17 inches, I'm going to be drawing my gathers to be at that point. So also what I'm saying is that the gathered area, that's this plain area, the length is going to be 17 inches so that it can relate with the lace area. So the gathered part is going to be 17 inches, and this is where I'm going to be placing my lace area at. So I just went ahead to be drawing it to be in a gathered form. So after drawing it, I just placed it on top of the lace area to check if it's up to 17, and you could see that it's not up to. It is not up to. So I'm just going to go ahead to still adjust it so that it will be up to the part where I marked my chalk. So this is just what I'm doing. I went ahead to adjust it, and I still placed it on top, and nope, it is not up to. So I'm just going to go ahead to adjust it, and then after adjusting, yes, it was finally what's up to. Like I said, I repeated the same process. So this is it. You could see this is the drawstring. We're just going to incorporate this at the skirts. So finally, this is one part of our drawstring. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to simply place it, and then I'm just going to sew it in a straight line. I placed the lace and the plain area together. I'm going to be stopping at the point that I marked 17 inches. So I'm just going to sew it in a straight line to join them both together. After sewing it, this is what it was looking like. I used my machine to run a straight line at it, and I stopped at the desired length, which was 17 inches. So we've really done that side. The next thing I'm going to do, remember guys, we've not done yet the other part. So this is only the first part I've done. So the next thing I'm just going to do is to run my machine through the waist area. I'm going to be joining the lace and the plain area together through the waist area. So I'm just going to be sewing a straight line through the waist area, joining my lace and my plain. So after sewing it, you could see what it is. I used my machine to run it at the waist area, so you could see what it was looking like after sewing it all together. You could see what it was looking like, right? The next thing I'm going to do is at this point, remember I said that at this point we've not done anything at this point, so we're just going to go ahead to join it also. So we're going to go ahead to join the second part of it together with the lace area. That's just what we are just going to do. And after doing it, this is what it was looking like, guys. You could see it's already looking like what we are trying to recreate. So I just folded it up through the back area, and I'm going to be joining them both through the zipper allowance area. I hope you understand. So this is the zipper allowance area. I'm going to be using my machine to join them both, and I do have a slit at the back. So after joining it up to the point of my slit, this is what it was looking like, guys. So this is the zip allowance area that I joined, and this is the front part of it. So the back part of this lace has a slit, so you're just going to sew it to the point of your slit. So this is what what it was looking like at this point. You would see that you could even separate the plain and the lace together, but then it is attached as only the zipper point. So this is it, guys. So this is the back part. As you can see, I opened up the zipper allowance area, and I'm also going to open up the zipper allowance area of this upper part, because we are going to be joining them both together through the waist area. So before then, I just went ahead to elongate my waist, the back parts of my half body. So this is what I'm doing. I just opened it up enough. So after opening it up, the next thing I'm just going to do is to join it. So starting from the zip allowance area, I connected both zipper allowance area together, and then I'm just going to sew it all the way through to the next zip allowance area. So this is just the normal way of joining the half bodies together. So this is just what I did here. So I'm currently done sewing these areas together. Remember, we sewed it together. I'm just going to bring it to the front so that you can see. So this is what I was talking about. It's not hard. This was the way I joined it. You could see I joined the upper part and the lower part together, and this is the back part that we've not joined yet. This is the zip allowance area, so we're just going to be imputing a zip. So for the sleeve part, I measured out the length of my sleeve. The length of my sleeve is 21, maybe 22, and then I just went ahead to impute my measurements. So for the upper sleeve, I imputed my measurement, and also for the lower sleeve, I imputed my measurement. So I'm just going to connect it together, and then I just drafted out the point at it. I'm going to be joining my armhole together. So I imputed my allowance as usual. As you can see, I imputed my allowance. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cut it all out. This is one part of the sleeve. I'm just going to place it on top of another lace and just cut out the other part of the sleeve. So I just notched it so that I will know my center point. And after doing that, this is what it is looking like. I connected this part of the sleeve together with the main cloth, and I'm also going to be showing you how to connect it at this other point. I'm going to be connecting it first. After connecting it, this is what it's looking like. So I'm just going to slim fit the sleeve part. So I measured out my upper sleeve measurement, my round sleeve measurement, and it was 5 inches. So I marked 5 inches at this point, and then from the bottom point I came up by 7 inches, because I wanted it to have like a little opening at that point. I did not want it to be all round pencil, so I measured out my lower sleeve circumference and I connected the line together. So you could see that I'm just going to go ahead to sew over this area, and after sewing it, you could see that there's an opening at this point which we made. I'm going to go ahead to fold it. The opening is going to stay, and I'm just going to go ahead to fold this part, and I'm also going to fold the other side also. So we are done folding it. The next thing I'm just going to do is to impute my zipper, and I'm also going to close up this neckline area, and I'm going to fold the bottom part of it. So guys, I'm currently done with this dress. You could see what is looking like. I've not yet imputed my zip at the back, so I just used a pin to pin it down. I hope you learned something. I was able to style it in 3 different ways. So if you learned something, please do like and to subscribe to this video. See you guys on my next tutorial.